Alright, guys, I have found something. Well, I found something through somebody else finding something. A cesspit of stupidity, of retardation, of slowness, no, more accurately, stoppedness. Something disgusting. And it's called A Guide to Neopronouns. Ooh, and this was found on the wild depths of the New York Times, though you would not believe it, from the sorts of heinous art that is on this page. But believe me, it is there. Now, before we begin on this quest through this pit of utter insanity, I need to forewarn you. First, this is not for the faint of heart. This sort of thing will begin as simple nonsense from the left. Simple, meandering, and utter ridiculousness, of course, but it will devolve. It will devolve into some of the most lack of understanding, the most ridiculous things that have ever been said by anyone speaking a language, though it is arguable that even in this case, they are not speaking a language, but rather chanting to the devil himself. I don't know. But dropping all airs, I had to go through a lot of pain to read this. Subscribe, please. Alright, let's not meander any longer. Let's get into this. We're gonna go through this entire article and just break it down, because there are a lot of problems, and the thumbnail is accurate. Let me just say that. They are anti-English. They do not understand the English language. It is entirely clear from this entire article that leftists are not literate and do not understand language. They are non-lingual. You know how some people are bilingual and understand multiple languages or two languages and the like? Yeah, these people are non-lingual. They don't understand language, period. Because I'm saying this at least half seriously. I'm not sure what the exact percentage is. But this is just an absolute example of such. First of all, let's begin. From Ezra Marcus, we have: a personal pronoun is a form of speech that stands in for a person or a group of people. She is having opinions online. They are fighting in the comments. And of course, as in the Prince song made famous by Sinead O'Connor, nothing compares to you. Non-binary pronouns as well, often the singular they, which is already a problem, but we're going to get to that, have become widespread, which is a very sad thing. 1 in 5 Americans, apparently, know someone who uses they pronouns, otherwise known as 1 in 5 Americans knows a moron. And then there are neopronouns, or, as we're going to get to, anti-pronouns. Because you see, in order to understand why neopronouns are such a fascinatingly poisonous concept, you need to first understand what a pronoun is and why this is the utter antithesis of it. Now, to put it in completely layman's terms and as succinctly as possible, a pronoun is a noun or proper noun with less steps. The whole point is that it's a generalization that is used after you've already used the proper subject, the either noun or proper noun, and once you have done that in a sentence, then any sentence after that point in which you are referring to that subject, without changing the subject, of course, in the interim, you can use a pronoun to refer to that subject in order to save time and to save on thinking power. Now, what neopronouns are proper nouns with extra steps. So, literally, the exact opposite of a pronoun. Because the whole concept of a neopronoun, as in excruciating detail, explained in this article, is that a neopronoun is a proper noun where you can explain any single thing about yourself in which that you choose, can change at random, have nothing to do with literally anything at all, and are infinite. There can be any sort of neopronouns at all. You can create one yourself. Just go into the world, look at an object, and then say, all right, I see a book. Books self. That's my pronouns. Book and book self. That's my pronouns. And that's what a neopronoun is. Now, that is not a pronoun. It is an anti-pronoun. Because what I just did there was take the entire concept of pronouns and reverse it. Because the whole concept of pronouns, just to go back fully to Schoolhouse Rock days, which these people clearly did not see, or at least didn't understand, which would be understandable considering they were literate and non-lingual. To do that, you need to understand a pronoun, the reason it exists this way, is something to simplify the English language. It is designed to be a simple way to refer to someone when you've already referred to them in sentences before, so that you do not have to repeat yourself over and over again. This concept exists in almost every language that exists. In some languages, they do it differently in that they don't have a full set of pronouns, or at least pronouns that are used commonly. A good example of this being Japan, where rather than simply having a pronoun for a subject, whereas I would say, your name, and then I would say you from then on. I could say, in Japanese, your name, and then I would be able to remove the subject entirely and just say the sentence without the subject. Same concept, same function in the actual language, but a different way of doing it. That's what pronouns accomplish. I'm sorry for the notification there. I'm actually going to turn that off. Instead, I made more noise. Hey, that's not a problem. Forgive me. But getting back to the subject. That's what a pronoun does. All it does is it simplifies the language. All it does is make it so that your language is simplified, so you don't have to continually repeat someone's name. You don't have to say Benjamin over and over and over again when you're just trying to refer to one guy. You only have to say it once, and then you can use the pronouns for the rest of the time. And this applies to all sets of pronouns that are actually pronouns, but it does not apply to neopronouns. Neopronouns are nonsense. That's it. That's all it is. And this article perfectly encapsulates all of this. And there's so much of this all over the place. And I want to skip around to a couple sections, which I'm going to mostly laugh at, honestly. So, next section is, so, is this real? Yes, is the answer, of course, because these are a bunch of trans activists. And it's around any leading edge behavior online. Trolling, hijinks, and bad faith collide indistinctly. For those unfamiliar with the culture surrounding anti-pronouns right now, it's likely impossible to distinguish between what's playful, what's deeply meaningful, and what's people being mean. Otherwise, rephrased so that we're being a bit more honest, it's likely impossible to distinguish between what's a fetish, what's a mental illness, and what's people being sane, making fun of insane people. Which is a better picture of what's going on. Many anti-pronoun users are dead serious mentally ill, and are also part of online communities that are quick to react swiftly to offenses. They are deeply versed in the style and mores of contemporary identity politics conversations. Once again, this is in the New York Times. This isn't some Medium article. This isn't Substack. This is the New York Times. It's amazing. I am frankly stunned that this is in the New York Times. And, of course, they attach something of someone being canceled for not understanding that neopronouns are a thing, that these people exist, and whatnot. And then being groveling on the floor, and, of course, doing the whole mea culpa thing, because what else is a leftist supposed to do other than mea culpa when they run afoul of their intersectional wiles? And it continues on, and as we go on throughout this article, it continues to get more insane as we keep delving into complete mind nonsense that consumes these people. At some point in this article, it pretty much stops being language and just starts being garbled nonsense fed through an identity politics Mad Libs. It doesn't look like an actual article. It doesn't look like actual language that's going on and actually being written by anyone in reality. It just looks like someone like I said, doing Mad Libs with anti-identity politics. And this just continues on. And of course, it's filled with intermittent artists' renditions of themselves. Of course, I imagine completely embellished, and also it's not even very good looking to begin with. But it gets to the point where it does actually end up acknowledging certain criticisms and then dismissing them outright without actually refuting them at all. It gets to the point where someone says, bro, neopronouns are going to break the English language, which is accurate because they're anti-pronouns and not neopronouns. And it goes on to say, well, it's not a new concept that we're going to break the English language. You see, there's a guy who set out to find all of these obscure examples of people doing things that are stupid. Which, of course, he found 200 examples of such, or something to that effect. It's totally fine. They've been doing this since something like the 16th century. Okay, they're all stupid. A stupid idea does not end up not being stupid just because it's old. Socialism is a very old idea, actually. It's an idea that goes back to Plato's Republic. Plato's Republic is a socialist state, or a proto-socialist state, if you consider Marxism to be the genesis of the modern socialist movement. Plato is still a predecessor of that idea. It's a very old idea, the idea that the public should own the means of production. It continues to be a stupid idea. It was when Plato said it, because Plato was frankly not incredibly intelligent, or at least not intelligent as he thought he was. And it continues to be stupid to this day with breadtubers like Foch and other people like that screaming about Wikipedia articles all day long into their Twitch streams, while they're simpering fans going around saying, "Oh, you're taking it out of context." No, not really. And this is a very similar idea. The idea of non-gendered pronouns and that sort of stuff have existed for a long time. In fact, it goes back to the genesis of the word he. Here's an interesting thing about the creation of both he and she. He came first, which is not a play on who's on first, but rather an explanation of what he is and why he can actually be used in a non-gendered way. You see, he as a word is older than she. Reason being that most gendered things were originally, it was just the male thing that applied to everyone. And then the females came in and said, well, I want a special one. And then the special one came up and the he one became relegated to the males. That's pretty much how a lot of gendered things came into existence. It's quite a fascinating concept, actually, that goes back hundreds of, a very long time. It is something that has happened over and over throughout the ages, where a word will come into existence that is meant for everyone. The females will want a special one, and they'll get it, and then the original one will be relegated to the males. It's quite a funny concept, and that's what he is. So if you want to use a non-gendered pronoun, just say he. I'd even accept that, despite the fact that it's such outdated English that it really doesn't apply in most cases. But using they as a singular, it sounds stupid. And for everyone who's using it, do you use they is or they are? Because here's the thing, if it's a singular, you should use they is. But they is sounds stupid. It sounds retarded because it is. So most people who use they as a singular pronoun still use they are when they're referring to they as a singular. Which doesn't make sense. But that's the nature of these sorts of things. And, of course, these people will constantly chant, well, we exist. We are valid. No, you aren't, invalids. In fact, that's what this article pretty much ends on. A Twitter post of someone saying, leave self, and then saying, officials have stated these are valid. No, they're not, invalid. Also, I understand you do exist, but you should stop. All right? That's where I'm going to leave that off. Moving on to our next segment, where we're going to be talking about a couple of shootings that have happened. And these are, well, to put it lightly, much less cut and dry than certain other shootings that have come up in the recent past, such as the Jacob Blake shooting. The first starts with Dwayne White. That was something that happened over the weekend last week. And this shooting, just to put it out there right at the beginning, was not justified. In this case, this was, of course, it was an accidental discharge, as the officer herself made pretty clear in the actual video itself, and as the chief of police said before that. And I believe at this point the officer has resigned and potentially has been charged at this point. And I believe with actually involuntary manslaughter, which is the correct charge. I have launched the body cam footage for both of the shootings that happened, that happened, and I'm going to be talking about today. And for this one in particular, it makes it pretty clear that she was trying to tase the guy. And that is something in her favor. And it shows that it's not premeditated murder, certainly. But it doesn't exonerate her of everything she did. It is gross negligence to say you're going to tase someone and shoot them with a firearm. I don't care how similar they look or how similar they feel. I don't care where they are, how all that sort of stuff works. When you say you're going to tase someone, you don't get to shoot them. You just don't. All right? And right now, I'm pretty sure that involuntary manslaughter is the correct charge here. And I don't know, of course, whether she will be or should be acquitted or convicted of such, though I'm leaning towards conviction at this point, because at this point I don't see where the defense comes in against involuntary manslaughter. Of course, there's no racial component to this, and I'll get to the next one. There's no racial component to that either. But what this has caused is, of course, the initial complainings and statements from many people, whether it be Ben and Jerry's and the Obama saying that we need to reimagine policing and all that sort of stuff. All of that sort of stuff, of course, occurred. And as well, rioting started happening ahead of schedule, of course. It was going to happen after the Derek Chauvin trial anyway. They were entirely prepared for this, but this upped their plans a bit. And so, that's what ended up happening and what has been happening over the last week. We're having a bit of a repeat of what happened last year with regard to the riots. And this has been bolstered by the next shooting that happened, which is a shooting of one 13-year-old Adam Toledo, which is a bit more of a complex shooting. This one is really a toss-up. I do not know whether this cop should be convicted, whether this cop should even be charged, or what. I don't know whether this is justified. I don't know. I've watched the body cam footage, not all of it, because there's a lot of secondary officer footage, but I have watched the main body cam footage of the actual officer involved and the secondary officer who was a witness to the shooting, and this is what I come away with. First of all, let's go through a timeline of events that's going on here. They were essentially chasing in a car. I believe this kid and his accomplice were both trying to, were shooting at a car or something. Something to that effect. They both, at least the kid was armed. This is something that needs to be established early on. The kid was armed. They get in a chase. The cops get out of the car eventually, and they chase them down an alleyway. And the first guy gets caught, the accomplice. He's I believe, still alive. I hope he's still alive. And he gets over to this impasse where there's an opening off to the side of the alley, and he starts pointing his gun at the kid because he sees the gun in the 13-year-old's hand and says, "Hey, drop that, turn around, show me your hands." And what happens after this is where it gets really complicated, because what ends up happening, if you're looking through the footage very carefully, is the kid moves his hand behind the fence and throws the gun, or tosses the gun. It doesn't really go very far. And then he turns around entirely and brings his hand up to around here. And at that point, the cop fires. And there is a lot of questions about this. We don't know what the cop was thinking in this moment. Though I imagine the cop thought, crap, he just turned around. He probably still has the gun in his hand. I can't risk it. So he fires, and the kid immediately drops on the ground. I think it was only one shot that got off before that happened. And the police officer immediately goes up to the kid and tries to get medical attention to happen, but it doesn't end up getting there in time, and he ends up dying. And this, to be clear, is a tragedy. No matter how you spin this kid, he was too young to die. Far too young to die. The kid was 13 years old. But on top of that, he was involved in some seriously bad stuff. Having a firearm in that sort of context, where you're being chased by the police, and being in that context, it's never a good look, really. It really never is. And it's just such a shame that he died that day. I want to make that entirely clear, that I'm not trying to insult this kid or anything like that. I'm also not going to insult the cop, because this really looks like a toss-up. I do not know whether he should be convicted, whether he should be charged. I don't know anything about that. That is something for the justice system to point out. And that's in both of these cases. Both of these cases, the justice system has to play out. That's something that needs to be clear, especially in this case, because this really is a toss-up. Whether this is justified, really comes down to whether the cop was reasonable in his assumption that the kid still had the firearm and was going to fire on him. If he did believe that, and I'm sure he did, but if he believed that reasonably, then it's probably a justified shoot. And I know many people don't want to hear this, especially since there's a photo where his hands are up and they're completely empty. He doesn't have anything in his hands. Of course, he had already tossed the firearm away, but you have to recognize that he turned around, and while he was in the middle of turning around is when he was shot. He was shot in a split second. The cop had a split second to react and decide whether he had a firearm in his hand, was going to fire on him, or wasn't, and had thrown it away, or whatever. He hadn't seen the firearm drop on the ground. The way this kid threw away the firearm is probably the worst way I could possibly imagine doing so, throwing it behind cover so the cop can't actually see where it went. There's so many problems with this. Of course, he didn't deserve to die. He didn't. That is inarguable. He wasn't trying to shear the cop. He wasn't doing any of that sort of stuff. But at the same time, the cop may, and key being here, may have been justified. And looking at that photo that simply has his hands up, where it's empty, is a completely inaccurate way of looking at the situation. Because the fact of the matter is, in this situation, that is a single instant. And it turns out that in our brains, we do not have the power to stop time and assess a situation based on a photo, to ignore the temporal aspect of reality, to boil every single situation down to a single photograph rather than a succession of photographs and sounds and all of the sorts of things that come into the existence of life, is simply insanity and cannot be justified on any level. So the people who are doing that sort of thing, particularly those in the mainstream media who are slandering this cop as a murderer, which he clearly isn't, even if he wasn't justified, I don't think this is murder, period. Because I'm fairly sure this would be manslaughter. If he's not justified. And that is a big if. It is a toss-up. This is a 50-50. I don't know. That's why the justice system needs to be done. And this guy needs to not be slandered. There needs to be a clear public perception that there is no way to truly know this. But of course, that's not what the media is after. They are completely interested in simply propagandizing it to you. And this is no better exemplified than in what has been happening to Project Veritas over the past few days. You see, Project Veritas has been doing a bit of an expose on CNN, and they've done this a multitude of times. And I think this one is the most damaging to CNN out of all the ones they've done as of yet. In this case, they have shown things like CNN admitting to, or people from CNN admitting to the fact that the COVID death ticker was absolutely just propaganda designed to keep ratings rather than actually anything useful for the particular segment it was on. They've discovered that Jeff Sucker has control over that particular aspect and many other aspects, and that he has like a bat phone, and they've been doing these exposés over the past few days. And I really suggest you do it. And I suggest you check out the link down below where I have it. It is 3-1, by the way, under my sources tab. That's where I keep all my sources, by the way. I suggest you look down there and check out all my sources, make sure I'm getting everything right. That is all very well and good. It's all very good. I do suggest you do that, and particularly for this one, because this is the sort of thing that needs to be seen by a whole lot of people, and I'm not actually going to be covering this particular aspect of this story at all. And rather, I'm going to be covering the fact that Twitter has, just a few hours before I started recording this video, banned Project Veritas' founder, James O'Keefe. You see, they banned him for doing an act of journalism. And at this point, he has announced that he's going to be suing Twitter because they claimed that he was making doctored media and that sort of stuff. And, of course, Twitter is going to use the Section 230 defense against this. But, once again, that doesn't make sense. The Section 230 defense has gotten way too insane for tech companies. They're getting to the point where they can claim that their editorial decisions that they make using their community guidelines, that they make using things like what they have done to James O'Keefe, claiming that he has doctored media in an official capacity and using that to remove him from their platform, that somehow that isn't defamation, despite the fact that it clearly is, and it clearly is a statement from them. At this point, with how Section 230 is treated by the courts, you could apply Section 230 to the New York Times, not just their comment section, but their actual articles. The New York Times could credibly make the decision that, well, we're not going to take responsibility for anything that goes on our site. We're just going to say we're Section 230 applicable. We are a platform, and we claim Section 230 immunity. So all of our articles, if we defame you in our articles, we're not to blame. We don't have to deal with a defamation lawsuit. That's at this point what these companies can do. Or could potentially do. Of course, the New York Times is not going to do that. They have plenty of other ways of avoiding defamation suits, though of course that's not really working out in the case of their suit with Project Veritas, where at this point, Project Veritas is winning pretty well. But in this case, it is sort of a toss-up. Once again, there are a lot of ambiguities within this particular episode of Breaking on the Daily, and this is another one where we don't know whether this sort of defense is going to end up working, because the courts haven't been very good on Section 230. Of course, this sort of thing should go up all the way to the Supreme Court and make it entirely clear that Twitter can't defame you through their banning services, through what they say you were banned for. They shouldn't be able to defame you for that. And that would cause a lot of things to change. It really would. It would make a huge difference in a lot of cases. And I really hope that this suit goes well. So, that's where I'm going to leave you guys off today. And if you guys enjoyed this video, as I stated before at the beginning of this video, do subscribe down below. And, as well, go down to all of my pretty links that are even lower down in the description, where you can find things like other platforms where I'll post my videos, and places like Minds, Parler, and Gab, where I'll sometimes put my thoughts, and which also act as repositories for the places where I put my videos. Well, that's where I'm going to leave you guys off. I'm KelKidman, this has been Breaking on the Daily, and I'm out.